Hello, welcome to White Threads FlossTube number 60. That's quite a bit of a milestone and one that I couldn't have imagined reaching some months ago. So here we are at number 60. I hope that you've learned a lot along the way. You've been kept company for a bit, particularly through these difficult times where I know some people are actually still in lockdown, and I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're getting lots of embroidery done and that your mental health is doing well. Today I thought that I would talk about, well, it started off being about evenweave fabric, and then I thought let's do counted fabric 101 and we'll go through the basics. So there are a number of different types of fabric that people use for doing counted embroidery, and possibly the most common one is Aida Cloth, which is this one here. It's often used, I'm trying to come in quite close so you can see that well. Hopefully that's given you a good view of that. This is the fabric that a lot of people use for cross stitch, particularly when they're starting out. It has interesting, maybe you can see it better like that. No, maybe you can't. I don't know. Anyway, it's got squares woven into it, and it means that it makes it easier to count for when you're doing your crosses. You just go from one corner of a square to the other corner of a square. Some people try and use this fabric for Hardanger embroidery. It is never, ever meant to be used for Hardanger embroidery. And there are good reasons for that. If this is what you have and you decide to give it a go, just know that you're not going to get the right effect, and it's going to be quite difficult. It's not going to look right, and it's not going to behave in the way that Hardanger usually does. So that's my caution for that. So that's Aida Cloth. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to show you is Hardanger fabric. I hate the term Hardanger fabric. I'll come in quite close. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. I've got no idea if you can see that. If it doesn't work out okay, I'll take some photographs and insert them so that you can see it well. So what this is for some reason, some fabric company decided at some point that they were going to call this Hardanger fabric. It's got pairs of threads that are woven in pairs rather than single threads. So they're in pairs. It's known as a basket weave often. And this is said to be used for Hardanger embroidery. I have no idea why. I've been to Norway, I've looked at a whole heap of historical pieces, and they don't use this fabric. They use linen. They don't use it with a basket weave. They don't use 22 count fabric. They use, which is what this is usually, they use fine linen, 35 count up to a 60 count. It's nothing like this at all. The scale's different. The weave is different. So this is Hardanger fabric, sometimes known as Salter, sometimes known as Oslo. I don't use it. I hate it. My first Hardanger was on this because that's what we thought we were supposed to use. But no, you don't have to use it at all. Linen. Okay, the next one I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk to you about my little bugbear, like I haven't been already, which is the term evenweave fabric. So I was looking this morning on my supplier's website, and it had a section for Aida, it had a section for evenweave, it had a section for linen, and it probably had other stuff as well. Well, it did, but they were the relevant ones. And fabric companies, once again, they have so much that they're responsible for, have decided that non-linen evenweave fabrics get called evenweave fabric. I don't know why. So an evenweave fabric is a fabric that over the same distance, so let's say 5 centimeters this way, 5 centimeters this way, or 2 inches this way, 2 inches that way, it's got the same number of threads that way as it does that way. That's what evenweave means. It doesn't have anything to do with the threads of the fabric, the fibre of the fabric, the whatever of the fabric. It is how many threads you can fit in the same distance over the warp and the weft. If it's the same that way as that way, it's even weave. It can be made of linen fabric. It can be a viscose thread, fibre. It could be cotton. It could be wool. It could be rayon. I don't know why you'd want to use rayon, but it could be. And the important thing is the number of threads that way equals the number of threads that way. So when fabric companies call certain fabrics even weave, so often they mean Lagana, things like Devosa, Arose, I think that might be its name, I have no idea, Balana, all these things that have often got some synthetic in them, which might be viscose, or they might be fully cotton, but they're not linen. They call them even weave, which sort of means to say that if those are even weave, then linen isn't even weave, but it is. But it means that some people think, well, if that's even weave and they've got all very, very standard thicknesses of threads and linen's got slabs and thick and thin, then that mustn't be even weave. It's nothing to do with the thickness or thinness of the individual threads that make up the fabric. It's to do with the number of threads this way compared to the number of threads this way. So if we look at this fabric here, this is a Lagana. I don't know if you can see that well or not. It is I can't even remember what it's made of, but it's got viscose in it. All of the threads are very uniform across and down. They are the same thickness. And some people like to use it for their Hardanger because it's so even. I actually don't like using it at all, and there are some really good reasons why. I think it's too uniform. I don't like the effect of that, but also because it's got the synthetic in it. When you pull your threads together, and a lot of Hardanger is pulled thread work and drawn thread work, where threads are drawn together and you need to pull them together and they need to stay together. When you've got a synthetic thread such as fibre, such as viscose, it does what it wants to do. It's springy. So you can pull it together and then you take your tension off and go straight back to where it was, because that's the nature of the fibre. If you're using linen, linen creases. That's one of the things that people both love and hate about linen clothing, is that it creases. And so when you pull your threads together and crease them, they'll stay like that because that is the nature of linen thread. So that's one of the advantages I feel in using a linen fabric for doing pulled and drawn thread work, because it behaves the way you ask it to rather than behaving the way it wants to. So then I'm going to show you here, this is a linen fabric. Once again, I have no idea if you can see that well, and if you can't, I'll insert a photograph which you can see. And you can, if you were able to see that, it's got thick and thin threads, but the important thing is it's got the same number of threads this way as the same number of threads that way. So that is linen. Now you can also get some fabrics that are completely cotton. They work just as fine. You can use them. There aren't very many that are just cotton, but they do exist. So that's the basics of our fabrics. We've got Aida Cloth, which you would use for cross stitch. You would not use it for Hardanger. We've got Hardanger fabric, or so-called Hardanger fabric, which it's just another even weave fabric, which means it's got the same number of threads that way as that way. And people can use it for Hardanger, but traditionally it was never used because it's way too large a count. It's usually 22 count. And so they didn't use it. It's also got a basket weave, which they did not use a basket weave. They used a single plain weave, which has single threads going that way and crossing over, you know, like this sort of thing. Not basket, so not this or this. Then we have even weave, so-called even weave fabrics, which usually have some synthetic in them, although they might be cotton as well. And they are things like Lugana, Devosa, Ariosa, Balana, and there are others as well, but I'm not really all that familiar with them because I just don't use them. And then we've got linen. And that is what I prefer to use for my embroidery, for my counted work. So each of those fabrics you could use for cross stitch as well. Each of those fabrics you could use for pulled and drawn thread work, but I've explained why I would prefer to use linen. Some people, however, really like the uniformity of the weave of the threads of these so-called even weave fabrics, which are the ones that are not linen. And they like that because they know exactly when they're going to hit their next hole, because it's always the same thickness of thread, and so it's got a very uniform look, and some people like that. Some people don't like the thick, thin look of linen, and I can understand that, but personally I prefer it. So in terms of how to work out whether something's even weave, I did a video of that. It was my FlossTube number 6, so I'll put a link to that so you can go and find out how to find out if something's even weave. So that means it's got the same number of threads this way as it does that way over the same distance. I hope I've said that enough times. And I hope that helps you to understand the different sorts of fabrics that there are, clears up what they might look like, what they might do, and yeah, hopefully that was helpful to you. If you have any further questions about fabric and the sorts of fabric that you might use for counted embroidery, then please just ask, and I'd be happy to cover that in a future video if I know the answer. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye.